doing everything here for a while, I feel like, maybe.
Well, it's a nice big room, so, I mean,
Did
The other room is
Did they
small.
renovate this room?
right.
Yeah.
gonna
These
say,
are not
this
the
is-
same chairs that I remember sitting in.
Well, it's much brighter in here, too.
Good evening. Welcome to the Planning Board for November 13, 2024. Can everybody please stand for the pledge? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you're here on an application to speak, we ask applicants to keep their presentations to 30 minutes or less. If you're a member of the public who'd like to speak on one that's designated as a public hearing, there are yellow cards on the back table. Please fill one out, and we ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. That being said, we'll go right to the first item on the agenda, Planning Board application, public hearing, Taco Bell of America, LLC, PB 2023-042, south side of Veterans Memorial Highway, State Route 454, approximately 0 feet east of Fifth Avenue, Bohemia, 0 Veterans Memorial Highway. Applicant requests a Planning Board special permit for a fast food restaurant with drive-through and approval of outdoor seating in the Industrial Corridor District pursuant to Section 68-466.1 L2 and 68-467H1 respectively. Site plan modifications may be required as part of the application. Applicant also requests a waiver of zoning code section 68-423.4C to allow less transparent glass on the street front facades and to allow a drive-through service window in the second front yard, 68-42311A to allow a 12-car queue in lane in the second front yard, and 68-423.11D to waive the sidewalk requirements along Fifth Avenue. Is the applicant here?
Yes, sir. Greg Alvarez from Amato Law Group, 666 Old Country Road, Garden City, New York, here on behalf of the applicant.
When you're ready, go right ahead.
All right, great. I'll just turn this around so we can see. Is this spot okay, by the way, for the easel, or would you like it a little bit closer to you? Whichever you prefer.
Is anybody here on this application from the community? Not see anyone, you can leave it there and just work with
Okay,
it.
fine. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We're here this evening to discuss the proposal for the construction of a 2,180 square foot Taco Bell restaurant with drive-through and outdoor seating service. The site is located at 3066 Veterans Memorial Highway in Bohemia, Suffolk County Tax Map Number District 500, Section 146, Block 2, Lots 8.3 and 8.5. As mentioned, the relief that we're seeking this evening is a special permit for the fast food restaurant with drive-through portion of the use. Separately, we are also seeking approval for outdoor seating. Those sections for that relief are 68-466.1 L2 and 68-467H1 respectively. We are also requesting a few waivers as part of this application that has to do with the fast food restaurant standards that are within your code at 68-423. We're asking for, in the notice we asked for 4. This evening, I believe we'll be asking for 3. In the intervening time, we were able to resolve one of those, and I'll just discuss those briefly. The first one we're asking for is relief from a requirement for transparent glass to be at least 50% of the horizontal portion of the building facade when facing a roadway. So we're asking for relief for that one. Also, we're asking for relief for the drive-through window to be located in the front yard. In this case, would be located on the secondary roadway along Fifth Avenue. We'll talk more about that one as well. The one that we believe we've rectified is the request for queuing, which requires 15 cars to be accommodated within the designated queuing lane for the drive-through. In further consultation with the planning department, we believe we've addressed that to accommodate those 15 spaces, but we're also able to accommodate more than that comfortably on the site in the event of further cars. So and then finally we'll be requesting a waiver from the requirement for sidewalks. We're asking for relief along, again, that Fifth Avenue frontage. It's kind of a unique frontage, which we'll talk about, to not provide the sidewalk in this case. We're actually providing a sidewalk leading to the building, but it's further along on Vets Highway, and it will lead down to the actual building. We're also asking for any site modifications that will be part of this process, and we'll be asking for a negative declaration under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. In a moment, I'll have David Bittner from Bowler Engineering to talk a little bit in more detail about those waivers. But just so you know as well, there is one variance we may need for this project involving the proposed outdoor canopy in the outdoor seating area, and that we would be requesting from the Zoning Board of Appeals. There may be requests also for signage to be determined once we have the full zoning review done in regard to that aspect of the application, but we'll show you the signage that we're proposing. The project, or the location of the property itself, just to situate things, is within a commercial corridor. It's actually within the industrial corridor district nearby to Long Island MacArthur Airport. It's on the south side of Vets, and as I mentioned Fifth Avenue before, it's on the southwest corner of Vets and Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue actually dead ends at the southerly end of our property, and so it's, again, sort of an unusual situation. The surrounding areas, primarily because it is a pretty busy corridor, there are a number of commercial activities that occur in the area. Just across Fifth Avenue is a 24-hour speedway. Across Vets are a variety of uses, such as motel, a bank, other light industrial uses, and just next to us to the west is a truck parking facility. So it's sort of a mixture. To the south is where residential sits. The property itself is actually quite large for this type of use. It's over 2 acres, just a shade of 2 acres actually, but it is quite large. We have frontage on both Vets and Fifth Avenue on the order of about 200 feet, so a lot of frontage there too. So we're specifically designated as a split zone. We are predominantly within the industrial corridor district, but on the extreme south, we are actually in Industrial 1. I guess that was just sort of a quirk when they created the corridor district, that they didn't include the entirety of our property. So just that little sliver at the bottom is in Industrial 1. But in consultation with the planning department, we do apply the industrial corridor district requirements across the board under your code. It's currently vacant. Predominantly covered with vegetation. So the intention here is to put this property back into productive use, but at the same time preserve some of that vegetation, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Can we just talk about, I mean, that's some of the concerns we're going to have, or issues that hopefully you can answer for us satisfactorily, are going to be, one is the buffer in the back. What's planted in there? Are you going to increase it, or just what's there? The loudness of obviously the cars sitting back there. There are residents behind it, as well as the speakers when people are taking orders.
Right.
So if you want to address that
Sure.
To start with, and I'll have a couple other questions more specifically after that.
Okay. So just to give you the orientation then, because as mentioned, the drive-through is certainly a question mark as to how it will operate. So we'll have the building in the central portion of the property, and then the queue will extend down towards the south and then up towards the north side. Actually, it's on the eastern side, which is where the window will be located. So the intention here, as mentioned, is to retain a 50-foot buffer along the southerly portion of the property. It's actually required under the code as well. But the intention there was, because there is that pre-existing vegetation that's already there, the intention would be to keep that vegetation in its natural state and not disturb it. And we feel that that could be, and probably is, the best way to shield the residences to the south. So we'll have that substantial buffer there in that regard to make sure that there is that division from the residential to the south. In terms of the speaker, I'm going to have our engineer speak directly to that, exactly where it's located in terms of its operation. But the intention there, again, is to utilize the buffer to ensure that there is sufficient distance and a barrier, not only physical barrier, but also in terms of the noise, to make sure that it won't impact the residences to the south. Just a few other things I'll point out in terms of the proposal. There's substantial landscaping that's being proposed as part of this. While we will be using the northerly portion of the property, even when we exclude the buffer, there will be approximately 36.8% of landscaping overall, even when you exclude the buffer area on the property. And that's the advantage of having this size property, to be able to create that additional landscaping for the site. Another point that we're going to discuss, just so that it's clear in terms of the standards that we have to meet, we have to talk about how the traffic is going to operate on the site. So I do have Ethan Schakowsky here from Atlantic Traffic, who will speak to that.
Not as concerned about the traffic. I mean, just going back again to the sound issue.
Okay.
I'm not sure what vegetation is actually back there now, what happens in the wintertime when, leaves start falling off and plants go into a different state, in terms of what that does for the sound in the wintertime. Certainly when there's 50-foot of vegetation back there, it's substantial.
Yes.
And I think it's a possibility of putting in a fence somewhere along the back that would actually shield that, some type of one that provides some type of a sound barrier, at least certainly in the wintertime.
Just so I understand, so the fencing would be to the north? I'm sorry, to the north of the buffer area, or just along the property line, just so I understand?
I think it's straight across the back you're looking at. So it also, not only the sound, but headlights as well driving back there, because that's going to be driving back and then turning, so that lights would be shining into the backs of those houses.
Yeah, no, we understand. So I think we're in agreement here. I think what we're going to try to achieve is the maximum degree of buffer that we can install within that 50-foot area. If the existing, our belief is that the vegetation that already exists would probably provide the best buffer, but if in the event additional landscaping is preferred along that buffer, we can certainly do that as well. In terms of the fencing, there is existing fencing along the property line. And so the intention there was to retain that fencing, because the other issue is, if you do put fencing, say, along that property line there, you would...
We're not talking the property line, we're talking further out towards where the queuing starts.
Okay,
So the buffer would be behind the fence.
I see. So the fence would be in front of the buffer. I don't think we have any... Just give me a moment. I'm sorry. Let me just double check. Okay, fine. All right. So yeah, we have no issues in terms of putting an additional fence on the northerly side of the buffer, if that would be preferred. In consultation with the planning board, it was really just trying to determine what the best approach is to make sure that there was maximum buffer there. So if that is the preferred route, where we would put the fence in front of the buffer and leave the vegetation as is in that 50-foot area, Taco Bell would certainly be amenable to that.
And can we talk about the hours of operation? Obviously, that's going to be a concern.
Yes. So in consultation with the planning department, we have received the proposed conditions of approval, and that does include suggested hours of operation. Taco Bell does prefer to have late night hours, because that's certainly part of their model in terms of their attractiveness for customers and the availability of it, and particularly in this corridor as well. When you do have the types of uses that are in the corridor, including the airport, that also provides a further amenity. So the suggestion was to set hours of 8 a.m. to 4 a.m. Typically how that works is that there would be a breakfast service in the morning. Generally, the in-building dining would occur and usually typically close around midnight, and then thereafter it would be exclusively drive-through. The outdoor area would probably function as well. Similarly, on the indoor dining, I know there's a requirement within your fast food standards that sets, I believe, 11 p.m. for the closure of the outdoor area, and that would be acceptable as well. So with the overnight hours, it would be exclusively drive-through.
So, I mean, we're sort of going out of order here a little bit, but we had nobody, do we have anybody signed up to speak on this application? I'm not seeing anyone, so we're going to just go forward. Mr. Brown has some questions, and I have some more questions. The 4 a.m. time for me is not something that I would
Yeah,
find acceptable.
that's something I'm concerned about, too. Typically, we will agree to 2 a.m., but 4 a.m. Is not something that we readily agree to. The other thing is, what time do you take deliveries? Do you take deliveries in the nighttime?
Generally, they are during off hours. It's not typically during the overnight hours, though, or is it, right? No?
Depends, sometime between 11 p.m. and like 4 a.m.
Okay, so representative from 7-Eleven is telling me that sometimes it is during those overnight hours to ensure that it's done
All right,
free and
yeah,
clear.
because my only concern is that Vets Highway is an industrial corridor, and it's commercial. You've picked the one location that has residential up against it. So overnight deliveries is a concern of mine, as is, that's why we're talking so much about the buffer with the sound retention and the lighting deflection and everything away from the residential, because 75 feet away from where you have the turn and the microphones are residential properties across the back. So those are my concerns.
No, and we understand that. And so, again, the intention with, the advantage of this buffer is that there is that existing vegetation to create that distance. Now, we do have, like I mentioned, pretty large property, and what we've designed it to is to make sure that we're complying with all of the requirements under the fast food standards, under the district standards, and so we also have that front yard setback. There's a larger front yard setback that's required in this corridor.
That's what I'm going to ask.
So that's sort of what we were balancing against. But our preference is always to try to, again, shift it away as far as we can from the residents. So I think we tried to accomplish that in the context of the other requirements on the district.
Now, in reference to deliveries, what type of trucks are typical for delivery? Are they tractor trailers? Are they box trucks?
Yes, typically they are tractor trailers, correct? Yes, they are tractor trailers.
And where do you take the deliveries in? What section of the building would you be taking deliveries into?
All right. You know what? I think it might be helpful to bring up our 7-Eleven representative who could speak directly to that. He operates all over Long Island, and so I think he could talk more specifically about the specifics. So if I can ask him to come forward.
Are we
if
doing
he-
Taco Bell or 7-Eleven? Did you just say 7-Eleven representative?
Did I say, oh, I'm sorry, did I 7? My apologies,
Right,
Taco
thank
Bell. So if you could introduce yourself and then answer the gentleman's question, it would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Yep,
If you just give your name for the,
Mohammed Mansour, and I'm the market coach for New York.
thank you. And my question specifically was what type of trucks and what time period they'd be delivering, where would they be delivering to the building? You know, the front of the building, the back of the building, side of the building?
So the normal is a tractor trailer. A normal time frame for receiving delivery at overnight, but also we have, if there's an issue with, sometimes we can get it early morning. So we can request the time that we want to get the delivery. But typically,
Well, that was my next question, is if it could be, you could restrict the delivery hours, if that would be a problem.
we can if it's needed. Also, the vendor has certain time frame, so like from 6 a.m., they do it from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. So we can change, we can request any time that we want the delivery to come in.
Okay, because we'll probably ask to put restrictions into the
And
covenants
normally
and
the delivery
restrictions.
come through, if it's overnight, it's come to the back door, like back of the building, not the front.
If we restrict the time, it's not as much of a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
There is one more point we'd like to make, and I'd ask that our traffic engineer step forward and introduce himself, just to explain what the reality will probably be in terms at least where the truck will be. So I'd ask Ethan if you could step forward and introduce yourself.
Ethan Chikoski, Atlantic Traffic and Design, professional engineer, traffic engineer for the project. Offices at 275 Broad Hollow Road in Melville, New York. So it just, in review of the geometry of the site, it's our belief that's more practical that the trucks would need to park more near the front as they turn into it, rather than have to go all the way down and turn around the drive-through lanes and the order boards and that sort of thing. So they may have to wheel the deliveries to the back door, but in terms of proximity to that residential, I expect that most of the trucks will be more in the front of the site during those off hours, further away from residential lots, just based on how the site's laid out. I just wanted to make that point.
What time is the actual Taco Bell, the inside, open for the public?
Answer that question better.
In the morning?
In the morning?
Yeah, in the morning. So there is breakfast service, so the intention here was to open at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
So based on the comments, a restriction of, say, 8 to 11 p.m. for deliveries would work? You can put a restriction on that? If you're going to speak for the record, come up to the microphone. If you're
Yeah, why
telling
don't you
your
come up?
counsel what you're saying, then he can speak for you with one or the other.
I would say between 8 a.m. to like 8 p.m. because sometimes some of our restaurants get delivered, after 8 p.m. So,
That's even better. I mean, if it's up until 8 p.m., I was worried about the overnight, so that's fine.
yep.
Okay. And the fence you're okay with. Now, what about the hours of operation for the drive-through? 4 a.m. is something that I think, I can't speak for everybody, but from comments I've heard from the board members, 4 a.m. is sort of outside the envelope of what this board would probably approve.
Well, I did take a quick look. Forgive me, I don't know if I have something I could submit into the record, but I did quickly take a look and see what the current hours of operations of other Taco Bells are within the town. And some of them do extend actually beyond 2 o'clock, at least in terms of the drive-through. So we could certainly submit that into the record afterwards to confirm that.
As
But
long as we're comparing apples to apples. We're not comparing against a industrial or comparing against a business behind it or something else. I want to make sure we're comparing against residences.
Understood.
So
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand.
But if you do that, it's going to put into question us approving this tonight, which I think our plan was. Right. The most recent one we approved was in Iceland?
Yeah.
In Bohemia, the most recent one we approved was 2 a.m.
Okay. Well, I mean, in terms of the context of the area, we did also look at and see what the situation is for existing businesses in the area, and that Speedway I mentioned right across Fifth Avenue, that is 24 hours. So there is already that activity in the area. So, I mean, I think that in terms of appropriateness, it would seem that, the 4 o'clock would fit in with the current operations of the surrounding area.
We can look, I mean, the difference here is going to be if you want to submit that information, we're going to reserve this evening to review that. If that's okay with you, then that's the direction we can go in.
All right, let me just consult if that's our direction here. All right. Yes, we would ask the opportunity to submit that information for the board's consideration if possible, and then reserve decision based on that if that would be appropriate, because the Taco Bell operations do certainly rely on those after hours transactions. So we would appreciate the opportunity to submit that information.
Certainly giving you the opportunity to make that decision. The other thing I just want to talk about, might as well get out of the way this evening, you don't want to continue the sidewalk down on Fifth Avenue, is that what you were saying earlier?
Correct. It was determined just based on the fact that Fifth Avenue does hit a dead end there, and on site we are proposing a walkway from Vets that will lead directly to the building. We thought that would be more appropriate as opposed to trying to meet the condition. The other consideration as well is that our traffic access plan includes an expansion of the asphalt on Fifth Avenue to allow for a designated left-hand turn out northbound. And so that was just another basis to allow for sufficient room for those improvements, and balanced also against the fact that the utility of having that particular sidewalk leading to that side of the property did not necessarily seem to be of the greatest utility. Again, particularly because we're going to be adding that walkway directly to the building.
Yeah, I don't per se have a problem with that. I think what normally happens in cases like that, there's a mitigation fee in lieu of providing that. And that's what I would just...
A
Whatever.
a mitigation fee to the town in lieu of the sidewalk, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
I don't
that we
necessarily
would-
have a problem with allowing that, just as long as you're okay with that, understand.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
But Mr. Brown has a question, I'm going to let you finish the rest of anything else you want to present. Those are the concerns that I had, rather
Okay.
than going on other
Okay.
topics.
Right. I mean, I don't want to waste the board's time, so we'll just try to
Yeah,
address
ju-
questions.
I was just, and it's just out of curiosity, on Vets Highway, you have one way in?
That's correct.
Why didn't you have going out there also?
So, yeah, that was DOT. If you'd like, we can sort of describe just briefly what the process was with them to create this access plan, if you'd like to hear a little bit more
Was it
about
the
it.
state that disallowed it? Or
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay, that's all you had to say.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to make any further presentation, we'll do a staff report after you're done, and then come back for any further board questions.
Okay, yeah, no, I think at that point, as long as we're addressing questions, we'll stay on our submissions. The only other thing I would like to submit into the record, though, we did prepare just a brief summary on our justifications for the overall for the waivers and for the special permits, so we'd like to submit that into the record. This is
We'll
a,
make that part of the record.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
So I'm going to go to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report, and then we'll come back for further questions.
very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the southwest corner of Fifth Avenue and Vets Highway in Bohemia, and it's currently vacant. Tonight, the applicant's looking to improve the lot for a Taco Bell drive-through. That involves the construction of a 2,200 square foot building with 18 inside seats and 12 outdoor seats. The drive-through lane can accommodate the required 15-car queue, and the site will meet parking and landscaping requirements, in addition to providing a 50-foot vegetated buffer along the southern property line adjacent to residences. The site does, however, front 2 streets, so several relaxations for the board will be required, which includes permission to allow a drive-through service window and drive-through lane in the second front yard, permission to allow less transparent glass on the street front facades, and a waiver of sidewalk requirements along Fifth Avenue. While the applicant is asking for a number of relaxations, the second front yard is along a dead-end road that only services this site and the gas station across the street, so there is no concerns at this time. The applicant also submitted a traffic study as required by our code, and they have satisfied all of the town's traffic consultant's comments. In addition, the applicant agreed to provide a plaza area in front of the building to align with the goals of the ICD study. Based on this and all the comments we heard tonight, planning would recommend the board reserve decision in order to update the conditions.
Thank you. Are there further questions from the board? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, my question would be for Kelly. Kelly, in your report, you said that we'd have to grant permission to allow a less transparent glass in the front of the building. Is that a code or something that we have?
Yeah, in the fast food section of our zoning code, there's a certain percentage, I don't know it off the top of my mind, that the facades have to have, let's say like 70% of that frontage needs to be transparent glass. Unfortunately, along Fifth Avenue, that's their service lane and their service window. So having transparent glass there looking into the kitchen, I don't think really was like the intent for that portion of the code. It probably was for like seating, you know, to see inside and things like that. So unfortunately, they do need to ask for the relaxation, but I don't think here it's unjustified at all.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything further you'd like to add on the application?
Just to say that, obviously, thank you for your time. And again, the intention here is to complement the existing district. We have this study that was prepared in 2017 that sort of laid out the purposes of the uses and the, you know, the underlying operation of this corridor. And so we just feel that having this operation, and we'll obviously submit this as part of our written submission as well, but because the purpose of it is to serve the airport, and the airport certainly operates at odd hours as well, that to have this restaurant as an amenity, we feel would certainly be a value add to the community. So we'll provide that information in our written submission as well.
Okay, I mean, I think we support, or I speak for myself, not the entire board, but from comments I've heard, I think the use is fine. It's just, again, the hours of operation, making sure the neighbors behind it are protected from cars idling, headlights
Absolutely,
back there,
absolutely.
the speaker when people are ordering. And I would just say, when you submit stuff to us, make sure it's, you know, we've gone through this before, it's apples to apples. Speedway's a gas station, the pumps are probably 150 feet or so from the residences, so it's, in my mind, is not the same. The cars that are pulling up in front of the building, not behind the building against the residences, so if those are the things you're going to submit, from my perspective, it's not apples to apples. So maybe there are apples out there to compare it to, and I'm happy to look at that and review that, but that's just, I'm asking you to do that. In terms of the airport, I mean, they do operate different hours, but there are restrictions on the flights and the flight times and overnight arrivals and the rest. So again, make a strong argument, bring it in, bring the proper stuff in. I don't want to go back and forth. I want to get to a conclusion, and if we can
And
get
the
this
same,
approved for you,
and-
get it approved for you so you can start operating.
Right, and we appreciate that. We understand your general support, and again, we do welcome that and appreciate it. And it's really just, trying to get down to these last details, and we hope we're able to provide that information for you to support the 4 a.m. Closure. So thank you very much.
The sooner you can get it to Ms. Wozniak, she'll get it to us, and we can get you back on the agenda as soon as we have that information.
All right, very good. Thank you so much.
Okay? Thank you.
All right, have a
Is there
good night.
motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to keep the public hearing open and reserve decision tonight.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to keep the public hearing open and reserve decision. Is there a second? Also, Mr. Ruggiero, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, we're reserved. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Town Board application, public hearing, Katrina Lee, PB 2024-022, southwest corner of Sunrise Highway Service Road, State Route 27 and Brentwood Road, Bay Shore, 1746 Sunrise Highway. Applicant requests the Planning Board special permit for an assembly and social recreation hall in the Business 1 District pursuant to 68-272.1H. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of the application. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening. Tonight, we're requesting
Can I just,
my name is Mike Munoz. I'm with Create Design Build Group. I'm representing Katrina Lee. She's here
do you
today.
have with you the proof of mailing?
Yes.
If we could just get those and make that part of the record. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Okay, we're requesting a change of use from what was a business use to an assembly use. The previous tenant was I Love Kickboxing, which is a gym space. It was classified as a business, but a gym is actually an assembly space. I guess what they were trying to do is call it a kickboxing school, which gives them the 150 square foot per person and reduces the occupancy. But it's actually, they actually have more spaces in New York City where there are assembly spaces, and they're functioning as a gym. She would like to use this space as a children's event space. She has a business now where she provides soft play equipment, and she delivers it to events. So she has some kind of experience in this field. That's all. I know that we're requesting 122 people, but that's based on the code, based on 15 square feet per person. We don't really need that many people, but that's what's afforded to us by the code. That's really all I have to say here. The space will be used as a children's event spaces for children's birthdays, communions, educational presentations, that kind of stuff. She'll probably also contact the local school and see if they want presentations, educational presentations set up with the event space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no cards on this. Anybody come in late wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan. Ms. Wozniak again. Ms. Wozniak, first there for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property's located on the southwest corner of Sunrise Highway and Brentwood Road in Bay Shore, and it's improved with the one-story commercial building with a mix of uses that includes a laundromat and some retail stores. Tonight, the applicant's looking to convert the westernmost tenant space into a social assembly and recreation hall for children's events such as birthday parties, magic shows, educational presentations, art classes, and things like that. The event space will be by reservation only and is approximately 2,700 square feet. The floor plan has a reception and waiting area, restrooms, and a seating and open area for games. Overall, the property could use some improvements. The property has an approved site plan from 1985, which shows the street trees and landscaping along Sunrise Highway, as well as dedicated dumpster enclosures closer to the building, away from residences. So planning would recommend the board grant the application, subject to the attached conditions, which require improvements that were mandated from a previously approved site plan to be completed.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No.
Is there a motion? Ms. Frugieri?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to close this public hearing and grant the application subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Motion by Mr. Frugieri to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed? Abstention? The application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Item 3 on the agenda, Town Board application, public hearing, Chester Striplin, CZ 2024-011, corner of Sunrise Highway Service Road, State Route 27, and Walnut Avenue, Bohemia, 4720 Sunrise Highway. Applicant requests 2 board special permits for a motor vehicle dealership and commercial storage of boats pursuant to Town Code Section 68-302F and 68-302N respectively, and a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 4772 in order to allow for the sale and storage of boats. A waiver of the minimum required lot size and site plan modifications are also requested as part of the application. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Glenn Graham with Graham Associates, 256 Orinoco Drive, Brightwaters. Representing Chet Striplin, who's with me tonight. He is the owner of Island Yacht. We were in front of the board a couple weeks ago, if you remember, and there was a couple open items that the board wanted us to address, particularly the location of the proposed storage building. We originally had it in the northwest corner of the site. I believe Mr. Brown had recommended possibly putting it closer to Argonaut Pest Control. We worked closely with planning staff and Mr. Colgan and came up with a couple ideas, which I've handed some new concepts up to you this evening. They're highlighted in yellow. All 3 were showing where we could put the building. We felt as though the position next to Argonaut Pest Control would be tough to get a 30 or a 40-foot boat into the building with a 20-foot truck. It would just push us a little too tight to the existing office space. So we're hoping the board would see fit to approve the position of the building in a north-south direction along Walnut Avenue. However, we would place the overhead door facing north to Sunrise Highway to direct any noise associated with service towards Sunrise and away from the residential area. The other thing we had left open on the agenda was just to re-advertise for commercial boat storage. That has been properly re-advertised, and would like to sell new and used boats here, and we're going to have occasion to store boats here as well. Mr. Striplin is going to maintain this facility in Lindenhurst that has the majority of boat storage, boat repair. This location will primarily be used for new boat sales. And I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you. We don't have any cards. Anybody wish to be heard on this application? Come on up and fill out a card afterwards. You first, you come up right afterwards. Yeah. Just state your name for the record.
Good evening, Jackie and Phil Rizzuto. We live at 30 Island Boulevard, directly across from the property in question. So the proposal of this storage area is directly across from our house. You know, that has us concerned a bit. Noise, lighting that might be on the building that could be coming into our home. There already is a light in that area that does come through our front door, so any additional lighting would be of concern. We have multiple concerns as far as what really is going to be going on, the hours of operation, pardon me, when trucks are going to be transporting boats and dropping them off, you know, what kind of noise that's going to provide. Our bedrooms are directly on Island Boulevard. We hear a lot that goes on. We also have some concerns about additional entries or exits from that location. Right now, the main exit is on Walnut. We wouldn't want there to be any type of exit on Island Boulevard to, further cause traffic or disturbance to our road. Some of the other concerns were there is a buffer that's not 25 feet from our property currently, and the maintenance of the property is in question. There are trees, and there's some ground cover, I don't know that I would call it grass, that would need to be maintained, because when that is let go, it looks horrible. And so we wouldn't want anything on that property to encroach any closer than it already is, being that, it's our belief that that is closer than it should have been allowed in the first place for the current business that's there. And also I don't know if I mentioned this, but the delivery times of these boats or things and the hours of operation for the boat sales.
Thank you. Yep, come on up.
Good evening, how are you? My name is Lily Bedoya. I own 28 Island Boulevard in Bohemia. I also have a few concerns in regards of maintenance. The maintenance is terrible. I just cleaned my leaves, and after an hour, all the leaves were coming to my property, and it's always been an issue. I'm also concerned about the hours of operation, the noise, how the buffer is going to be to help with this issue, and pretty much everything that feels like right now. Also, summertime, the car wash, you see a lot of cars parking on Walnut Avenue. So is this going to be also an issue with this new use? And basically, that will be it. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go to Mr. Colgan for a staff report, then we'll come back, answer those questions, and ask further questions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This application was reserved at the October 30th hearing to re-advertise for the commercial storage of boats and address noise concerns associated with the proposed Butler building. After careful consideration with the applicant, the planning staff proposed the following. It's requiring the Butler building to have overhead doors face north away from the residences, requiring the insulation of the building to mitigate noise, limiting the hours of operation to between, I believe, I'll defer to the applicant, but I believe they wanted, was it 7 to 8, Glenn?
8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Rather than 9 to 8.
Okay. That's why I have my staff report. Requiring that outboard motors only be started while inside a water tank, as well as infill plantings along the southern portion of the property and within the Island Boulevard right-of-way. The proposed covenants would also permit the planning board to revisit the application should substantiated noise complaints be received. Based on the proposed mitigation, which goes above and beyond what the town had imposed with the current shed and gazebo place, the staff would recommend the board grant the application subject to these covenants and restrictions.
Thank you. Sean, can you just speak to lighting requirements?
Yeah, so generally speaking, lighting requirements that all overhead lighting be shielded. So I'm not certain for this property, but it's quite possible that the existing lighting is not in compliance. What will happen is this applicant will go through site plan review. The lighting will be inspected by the engineering staff to ensure compliance. So that should ensure that no light trespass is leaving the property.
Thank you. And also, on Island Boulevard, there'll be no additional entrance for cars that'll be added?
That is correct. The covenants currently require that that entire strip be vegetated. So there would be there's no permission here to authorize access Island Boulevard.
And then can you just speak to the applicant himself is here, but in terms of maintenance of the property and how you maintain your other properties?
Yeah, as part of our diligence, Chet and I did walk the property, and we actually documented all the street trees along Island Boulevard, and we both noticed and agree with the neighbors. It has not been maintained. There is garbage there. It is part of the town roadway there that's not being maintained, but Chet has agreed to, be a good neighbor and take care of that whole strip along Island Boulevard. There is large growth trees in there that we would not be taking anything down. We would be also adding an additional 5-foot strip along the back of Island Boulevard on the inside of our property to help comply with the landscape rules further than what the shed company has been granted. But certainly what the neighbors are seeing on Island will be maintained by a professional landscape company. As you said, no new exits back onto Island Boulevard as well. We're proposing 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. as far as hours of operation. Boat deliveries are done during the day. We would not be doing any type of overnight deliveries. Maintenance would all be done inside the building. Any starting of motors would be in a special tank that's going to be purchased. Could be moved with a forklift. And we don't expect any more noise really than what the shed company had.
Mr. Brown?
Right. I think we established 2 weeks ago also that there'd be no parking. The employees wouldn't be parking on Island Boulevard.
Oh, yeah, the site is plenty big enough for all on-site
Correct.
parking. We don't
Right.
expect
And we're not
any
gonna have
spillover, no boats on the street. Everything will be within the fence line.
Right, and for the benefit of the people that spoke tonight, there'd be no entrances onto Island Boulevard.
Correct.
And I thank you guys for sending the video out to the board members in reference to the noise level of the motors and everything that you work on, and they're extremely quiet. The boat motors today are extremely quiet.
Yeah, a
which,
long way from the two-stroke motors we grew up
Yeah, I was
with.
shocked at how quiet they were. You went through the delivery times, and I realized that the positioning of the Butler Building was not an easy one and everything, but I think that's the best location for the site to work with the entrance on Walnut. So I'm in good spot with this application now.
Are there further questions from the board? And just so you understand, you know in the covenants, if you've agreed to them, we're going to modify the one related to hours to make it 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. So
Please, yes, and we've read through the rest of the covenants and agreed to them.
and then you understand the condition of parking. If issues arise, parking, we can bring you back before the planning board. Same as well for noise.
Yes.
Is anything further you'd like to add?
Not at this time.
Is there a motion? Mr. Frugieri?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to close this hearing and grant this application subject to the covenants or restrictions that were discussed this evening,
With the one modification of the time.
with the one modification of the time being 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
It's a motion by Mr. Frugieri to grant close the public hearing, grant the application, modifying the one covenant for the hours of operation for 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Is there a second? Mr. Moriarty, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Item 4 on the agenda, Planning Board application decision item, Shaq and Ibrahim LLC, Naj Sharzai, PB 2024-018, northwest corner of Suffolk Avenue, County Route 100 and Church Street, Central Islip, 28-40 Suffolk Avenue. Applicant requests Planning Board special permit for a restaurant in the Business 1 District pursuant to 68-272.1G. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of the application. Not seeing the applicant, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the public hearing, the applicant has agreed to provide facade improvements to the proposed restaurant, which will include removal of the exterior overhead security gate. This is a corner tenant space that fronts 2 streets, so improvements to the facade will be well seen. In addition, the parking stalls will be restriped to maximize the number of stalls on site, and dedicated dumpster enclosures will be installed. While there are still some site issues that will need to be resolved in the future, as development of the site continues, those issues can be addressed gradually. So based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Any questions for Ms. Wozniak? No questions? Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty? Motion by Mr. Moriarty to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Wilson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you. Motion to adjourn? By Mr. Brown, second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor, opposed, abstentions, we are adjourned.